Hey everyone, I'm with Eric Wichems, who is CEO of Vertos Medical. And Eric and I have known each other for, I don't know, a couple of years now.
Yeah,
Eric is a former client, and I have absolutely enjoyed working with Eric and his leadership team. Eric, how are you today? Good to have you
I'm
here.
I'm doing great. It's great to catch up. It's been a little while, so it's always a thrill to have this conversation with you.
Oh man, I'm thrilled.
Yeah.
I would do this every day with you if I could. Look, the point for today is for us to briefly explore for folks like you who lead important teams inside of organizations who are taking on big things like launching products or a whole new strategy or M&A or whatever might be involved with a big thing that a leadership team takes on. What do you need out of your team and how do you help them get what they need so that all of you can accomplish big things together? So put the other way, like a lot of teams, they're not doing the big stuff. They're not
Yeah.
doing it. But you did, and you are. So
Yeah.
looking for some of your wisdom. What comes to mind with that question? What helps a team get through this?
Well, it's interesting that you talk about this because the start is always the critical part. You rarely get into a situation that is very clean and clear, that you say, here's what we need to do. It usually starts off with something doesn't feel right or something needs to be done and it hasn't been named. And so the real starting point, which is why I loved working for you, is you took a holistic approach to that in terms of let's first identify or find out what the team, including you, thinks about the current work environment. And what ends up happening a lot of situations like that is not only do you need some things out of the team, you need some things out of yourself. You need to be able to crystallize what you need to and want to have happen. You need to be able to articulate that to your team. And you need to be able to be humble enough to accept the fact that you need to change in this process as much, if not more, than your team. Because only then can you actually embark on big journeys.
I love that. A lot of right, even like management 101 courses start with like managing yourself
Yes.
before you even try to manage others, manage processes, manage organizations, manage companies. Like when I think back to the first time we talked, I think a lot of what was beginning to come into your awareness where there were maybe some points of feedback from your team that you were getting, or maybe scratched heads or points of confusion. Did a couple of things crystallize for you, like how you could first start with yourself and then help your team move into things?
Yeah, and it's a chicken and egg thing. Both happen at the same time, right? So whenever you're faced with something big, it invariably starts with the saying, okay, something is different from where we are right now and the world that we've been living in for the last year or whatever the case is. And so a lot of times you don't take the time to actually articulate what is different and what is it that we need to have change. We get the sense that we need to change. And the reason is, what is it that we're looking for changing and why? And so for us, it was a critical moment where we were extremely successful on a strategy that required us to focus on a single thing, to pivoting to a world of a company where we now had to do multiple things and do them very well and get all of those off the ground. And we realized that we were not organized and we had not been thinking in the same way historically as what we needed to have happen in the future. So approaching the world from a singular focus of we're only doing one thing looks very different than the world that you have to now do multiple things. And then so how do you deal with that situation? And what ends up happening is the skill sets that you used originally, i.e., in my case, was very directive, very focused, and so forth, will not carry you into a more comprehensive golf game. You used that analogy, which resonated very well with me, is when you have a singular strategy, using a driver to hit the ball may be an effective strategy. However, if you have now to do multiple things, there's skill sets that are required for certain situations that are actually the wrong skill sets or something that are completely destructive in other situations. And that risk becomes increasingly large the more complex you try to actually deal with work. And so that was one of the insights that came out of the original work that you and I did is you laid the cards on the table right to get go and saying, look, I'm going to not only interview you, I'm going to interview the team and I'm going to see what's going on. And if you guys really want to have this comprehensive team approach to tackling this multiple strategy effort, I need to get a 360 insight from everybody about what they think and what they feel. And it became pretty apparent in those types of discussions when you did the work that if I wanted to have this vision of a multi-strategy company, that I needed to work on some things and change some things as a leader, which was incredibly big revelation to begin with.
You did it well. You did it as well as anybody I've ever seen. You know, it's as you talk about that strategic shift from something fairly simpler to something far more complex, a shift in strategy. I know one of the things I learned from you, and I love the phrase sculpting fog. Yeah. Did you hear that from somebody or did you make that up yourself? I don't remember.
I don't remember. I've been using it for years, but it really articulates what it is that you're trying to do.
Yeah, sure. And I'd fly down to Orange County and be with you all, and it would be like a whole new fog bank had moved in, and you and your leadership team, like it's just fog. It's such a great metaphor because things were foggy between you. Your team members are trying to focus on their function, think cross-functionally if they can, think big picture at 40,000 feet, execute on tactics, hire more people, and like it just swirls around you sometimes. Like you can get swallowed by that fog. So what have you found helps, even just minimally helps teams get clear at focusing on the right things, prioritizing the right things, taking action together as a team on the right things?
Well, the first thing that you need to do is you need to compartmentalize or separate things, which is when you fundamentally talk about sculpting fog, at the heart of it is about decision making. So decision making is at the heart of what we need to do. And sometimes the decisions are not so clear because the situation is not so clear. And that's where the sculpting fog comes in. And in other cases, the decision making process is actually really clear. And so one of the things that you actually need to articulate as a team is this a nebulous situation? Are we in the fog? If that's the case, let's acknowledge it and let's have a process on how to deal with the uncertainty of the situation, which requires you to take a moment first to analyze the situation that you're in. Talk about how you feel about it. Talk about what makes you concerned. Talk about this without actually going straight to a decision-making framework or network. Now, other situations, doing that is the absolute wrong thing to do because it creates confusion on direction. So one of the first things that you need to do is basically saying, what situation do we find ourselves in? Because if it's a situation that is vague and nebulous, there is one set of framework which you helped us out with that you should use to make decisions. Whereas if you're saying, no, this is one of these where it really boils down to who has to make the decision. Is it the leader that has to make the decision? Is it the team that has to make the decision? Is it leader makes with team buy-in? Define that and then go and execute. So that piece is very critical. At the end of the day, the reason why you're doing this is you have to make a decision at the end. And acknowledging that up front and saying, does a decision need to be made? And if the answer is yes, then what kind of decision is it? And if the answer is we don't know, it's confusing, you're in sculpting fog. And you should definitely acknowledge that and handle it very differently than a situation where the decision rights and who makes the call is actually really the issue.
I can still see that afternoon when we had that conversation
yes.
about the differentiating the situation and which decision-making approach might be most useful.
Yeah.
And you know, as I work with a lot of leadership teams, one, clarity is just the currency. Like if things aren't clear, a billion things go sideways behind it.
Yeah.
And two, getting clarity on decision-making is just critical for leadership teams. Is it mine? Is it ours? Is it yours? Do I have input? And not to get way wrapped around the axle on decision rights matrices, but just 80% clarity. What do we expect on this topic? What's the urgency and who's going to make that decision?
Yeah.
That was a great day when we finally sorted all that out.
Yeah.
Do you have go ahead.
No, I was basically going to say that. It's interesting because you emphasized a lot of with time with us in being clear and communicate clearly with each other, which I actually thought was a very, very novel approach, because a lot of people start with a traditional, you got to build trust, you got to do this, you got to do that. And I came to the conclusion after working with you that actually the number one place to start is being clear in your communication. Without clear communication, you can't build trust, you can't do anything, because if you're talking a different language from somebody else, you're not able to establish the bonds that form the relationships. So one of the big conclusions that I came out of the working with you for a year and a half was the place to start is to actually get an alignment on basic communication. How are we going to talk to each other? That's it. So start there.
Yeah. Thank you for connecting these topics for us. Part of, I think, team effectiveness is very much around clarity, decision-making, and accountability, goal achievement, name it. Very cognitive side of our brains. And I would say all of that is intimately connected with who are you? Who are we? What's driving you?
Yeah.
How diverse are we when we're all together? What's the vibe we want? How do we want to feel mutual support? And one of the things I was struck by your team over time was how it became safe over time for people to check in with very transparent feelings of either joy or despair or confusion or just the profound things that, especially for small, medium-sized businesses, but I think everywhere, like these tasks, these chores, these things we aspire for inside of organizations can rip us up.
Yeah.
And so teams being able to come together from a compassionate human level, I think is equally important to getting like decision making figured out. Do you have some sense looking back now how that side of things helps your team achieve big things?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of stuff that I wish that I had learned earlier in hindsight when we were working. So I've been working again with you for about a year and a half. And the starting point is really, as CEO, especially leader of the team, is to be reflective, which is when we are together, what is the purpose for us to be together? And what I mean purpose, I'm talking about deep purpose. Like what brings us all together as a senior leadership team? And why do we choose to spend our time together when we could be doing a bunch of other things? And if the answer is why do we choose to spend our time together is strictly transactional and saying, well, I need this because you told me to be here, then you have failed the true connecting piece that is required for an effective team, which is what is the connection that basically puts us together? And it's not just the general purpose of the company. The purpose of the company is what aligns us. It is really around the individual bonds between people. And why do we think that it's valuable to spend our time together becomes so critical. And that's piece one. So if you combine the why are we here? Why are we even talking to each other? How is this the best use of our time? And you combine that with, well, okay, we're here because we need to work things together. And there's something in our gut that tells us that we are better off doing it together. And then you combine that with, okay, at the end of the day, we need to make decisions and we need to clearly differentiate when we are making decisions and need to make decisions versus just informing each other. And if you get that magic between the two of them and saying this bond forming between why is it that the two of us are together or the four of us, like that piece, combined with, are we here for information or decision? And the clearer you are with those two things, the much more effective you're going to become. And the meetings are going to be much better and everything else when you do those two things, when you're cognizant that that's what's going on in every single situation when you're meeting with the team.
And then as a team, you're playing the long game and the short game.
Correct.
Like everybody's immediate actions with their teams and how they work cross-functionally are so much more efficient and effective when the top of the team is aligned.
Correct.
And I don't think that means like we have to be so close, like we can finish each other's sentences. I just mean like it's close enough. Like we get each other, we know why we're here. I mean, sometimes we think you have to like each other, but we
Yeah.
probably do need to appreciate what each other brings, have some moderate amounts of humility and vulnerability, but just because the team is worth investing in. That's how we're going to get stuff done.
Yeah, and you nailed it, Ben. I mean, you gave us an exercise a lot of times to basically start off a meeting by describing what you're walking into the meeting with. Like, what emotional or mental state are you coming into the meeting with? And that's been infinitely valuable in many settings, because especially as high-powered executives, you frequently walk into a meeting with some version of let's get things done. And the problem is it's hard to get some things done when people are coming with different experiences into a particular setting. And I've actually had this exercise happen several times with my senior leadership team, where because we do this work up front in terms of saying, hey, tell me what you're walking into with. Are you feeling with anxiety, whatever the case is, that we've had situations where we have just cut off meetings, ended them at 45 minutes where they should have been an hour and a half, because people are way mentally occupied with something urgent that's going on in the business or other situations, or where we have completely changed things around because there was a consensus restlessness opinion of things that needed to be addressed in the underlying meeting, that you couldn't move past that effectively to talk about all the other things before you did that. And so check in at the beginning of the meeting is very important. And then secondary lies, honor what you hear in the check-in. Because if you don't, you're going to have very exhausted people, because you're going to be forcing them through the content of a particular get-together.
It does my heart good to hear you talk about this. Let's move to close. What's the one nugget, like the bullet you would leave somebody who's listening to this and maybe has a team or is a part of a team trying to take up big challenges? Maybe one place they could just start, one thing to keep in mind.
Well, the nugget I would basically give is the start is the most critical thing. So it should be everybody's ambition to close the gap between when you need help and when you ask for help. And the problem occurs, especially with CEOs, that you wait too long to ask for help, because the mentality is, we're going to try to figure it out. We're going to try to do things. We're going to try to do this. We're going to work through this problem. We're going to break it down. We're going to do it, et cetera, et cetera. And that may be the right solution for a certain decision that you have to make. But when you're talking about transformation for the company, it absolutely is not. And so the one nugget, for example, is when your gut's telling you that you need help, go get it right away. And chances are that it's you wish you'd done it sooner. When you go ask for help, be open-minded for the help, and recognize that it's not just your team that has to change and needs help. It is you as CEO as well. And that was one of the reasons that I actually decided to go with you, is you had an approach where basically right out of the gate, you said, I'm going to be working with your team to coach your team, but this doesn't work unless parallel to that, I coach you as the CEO too. And that piece is something that I never considered before I went into this. I'd considered in saying, oh, we got to work on team dynamics, not I need coaching in the context of team as well. So that would be my advice is on that. It's like start early. If your gut is telling you something is off, go get the help. Don't wait, because if you do, you will guaranteed realize that you should have done it earlier.
We say here at Team Elements, leaders cannot fix teams. Teams fix teams. And I love your systemic thinking behind that, Eric. So Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. It's great chatting with you, and I look forward to talking again in the future.
All right. Sounds good.
Thank you.
Take care, Ben.